All right, welcome to Seminole Sidelines. Happy Friday, March Madness in full force. We've got way too much to talk about, but we got some good men to talk right now. Charles Fishbein, our Osceola recruiting analyst, senior writer Curt Weiler. I'm Bob Ferrante. We're all with the Osceola.com. Again, Seminole Sidelines, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 12:30 here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We'll be talking all kinds of good stuff, and we have plenty to discuss today on Friday's show. We will start a big weekend with Florida State football recruiting. It is a legacy weekend, and Fish, I think maybe a good starting point is guys like Jermaine Johnson will be here, Jalen Ramsey, guys who have played for Coach Norvell and others who haven't, but they're going to be ambassadors for the program. What can they do or say to help sell and promote this program to 24, 25 prospects?
Right. I think someone like Jalen Ramsey, here's a kid that, when he had to go and buy into what they were selling at the time when Florida State was just turning the corner, and he was the top prospect in the country. Looking at USC, looking at Ohio State. I think he was may have been committed to Ohio State at the time. They had to sell Florida State on, hey, you come here and you're going to get us to that next level, that championship level. Florida State's in a good spot. They got to 10 wins last year. Those guys can tell them some of the experiences they had at Florida State and said, hey, listen, you guys are taking the same path. You fought through the hard times. Now you got to 10 wins. That next step is taking Florida State not only to the playoffs, but winning the playoffs and winning a national title.
So we've got a full visitor list on the Osceola.com. You can expect commitments like a Cam Davis and a Luke Kromenhoek. Jake Weinberg, the kicker, is going to be here. So it's going to be a busy weekend. And a lot of these guys come back again and again throughout the spring. So it's that continued visits from these guys just, I think, reinsures, if that's a way of saying it, reinsures these commitments for a lot of them. And they're able to help be recruiters too of some of these prospects in 24, 25. Fish, we've got the full list on the site and people can go there and give it a look, but give us a couple highlights, couple guys who you would say, hey, these are ones that Florida State coaches are looking to build those relationships and perhaps, if not this weekend, but in the coming weeks, solidify a commitment.
Yeah, I think number one, Charles Lester. Florida State wants a lockdown corner. They've recruited well in the secondary since Coach Norvell's been there. They got guys like A.Z. Thomas, but that next level kid, they lost out on Travis Hunter. But this is a type of kid, Charles Lester, that's a borderline 5-star, depending on which network you go on. He's like a 5-star shutdown corner, long, athletic. They want one of those guys that they could put on an island, let him lock down half his side of the field. And then basically on the other side, you could roll coverages over. If you have that one guy that could basically take away half the field, then as a coach, you have so much more versatility. Those other corners and safeties don't have as much pressure on them. You get a guy like Lester in the fold early on. He's also going to help you draw other top prospects in the defensive backfield. They want one of those guys. Lester's that guy right now at the top of their board, and he's been on campus. We always say, watch what these kids do, not what they say. He's been at Florida State multiple times. He looks like one of those guys that could pop at any time.
We've often kind of discussed it's very important to build the lines up front, offensive line, defensive line. I think Coach Norvell and the staff have done a really good job. With each year, you feel better about those position groups, quality and quantity up front. I know, Fish, in past years, we used to lament, some of those signing classes just didn't have enough quantity, just not enough numbers on the offensive line, because you have to go out there and grab some numbers and just develop those prospects. Some of the top offensive linemen that you think are in play for Florida State, and a number of them are going to be on campus this weekend too.
Yeah, Bob, that's the biggest complaint I've had for over 10 years is numbers. Throw a big net, throw a wide net that offensive linemen, a lot of it's just numbers. You recruit 5, and if you pull 2 starters out of there, you did a great job. You start to get 3 or 4 out of that 5, then you did a phenomenal job. they always recruited 2 or 3 and then 0 or 1. I mean, I remember the one year they got Brady Scott. I think he was the only one in their class, and he was a project. So now if you strike out 1 year and then that you have that 1 year with one guy, then all of a sudden it throws your whole roster management off. It hurts you down the road. You look at what Norvell and the staff have done. I love what Coach Atkins has done. I think they bring in numbers not only through the high school ranks, but also the portal. They are stocking that to make sure that no matter what, they can throw out a quality offensive line, even if they have a couple injuries, that they can still function as an offense. It's when you can't function as an offense if you don't have guys up front. Some of the guys that you look at, Jason Zendamela, he's a kid out of Clearwater International Academy, same school as Lucas Simmons. He dominated the Under Armour Combine last week. Big physical kid. If you notice, these kids are all a lot bigger. They're not, listen, I love Maurice Smith. He was a kid that I was very high on coming out, but he was a guy that really needed a redshirt year. He got banged up. He never got healthy. Last year, he finally got healthy. But you see with a kid like Jason here, he's a big, wide, thick kid. So when he goes to put on weight, he could put it on naturally. It's not rushed on. It's not, and it looks more natural on him than somebody that's small that you got to make big. He's a big kid. He dominates. He comes off the ball real well. He's going to have success both as a run and a pass blocker. I think they can put him as guard center. He's versatile enough to play any of those inside positions, and he's going to be a 4-star kid after people get to see him this spring. He's probably one of the top 2 or 3 interior offensive linemen in the class this year.
You mentioned Charles Lester earlier. A couple of defensive guys, whether that's tackle, end, linebacker, anybody that coming this weekend or perhaps down the road that is on the radar as far as that's a top guy you want to include in the class.
Yeah, I think Lawal McCray, he's from Daytona Mainland. I got to see him at the state championship game. He's a physically imposing kid. I don't know if you guys have gotten to see him when he stepped on campus yet, but he doesn't look like a high school football player. He's that guy that already looks like he belongs in college, and he still has a year of high school. So he's one of those guys that is 6'5", 240 pounds. He's going to be 290. He could probably play either strong side DN, move inside to tackle. He's versatile enough to play. You notice what the guys that Florida State takes, a lot of these guys aren't just stuck at one position. They like that versatility on the defensive line. He's another one of those guys. He's another kid on campus again. I think this is his 3rd time this spring that he's going to be on campus. That says a lot. You meet him. He's high on Florida State. I think he's a Florida State fan. This is a kid that if you get him, he has all the ability to be an all ACC type player down the road.
Fish, looking at, recruiting obviously cuts both ways look at Cam Davis, who has remained committed to Florida State, but has kind of said he's going to take visits elsewhere this spring and this summer. Florida State's, I know, had a few guys committed elsewhere. They had Jeremiah Smith on campus last weekend, a receiver committed to Ohio State. I think Landon Thomas, a tight end committed to Georgia, who was originally committed to Florida State, is going to be back on campus this weekend. Who do you see as guys who are committed elsewhere who Florida State may kind of have a chance at flipping?
Jeremiah Smith's a kid that they'll have a shot at just because if they come on campus, that's all you're asking for right now. Jeremiah Smith's not going to flip to Florida State right now. If he does decide it's going to be a season long, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. He's a guy that you want to keep getting him on campus. Like I said, I spoke to one coach once. That was at Florida State. He's like, Fish, if we get them on campus 3 times by the time their summer rolls around, we feel we have a shot at them. And that's sales in general. When you're selling, I don't care what type of sales you do. Recruiting is selling. You got to get these kids on campus. The more times you get them on campus, they start to see themselves, even though they're not on the team. I'll always go back to Timmy Jernigan and his recruitment. They kept getting him on campus. Then at the Florida game, they beat Florida. And I remember he was celebrating with the team in the locker room like he was one of the players. He had already envisioned himself as part of that team. And that's the thing is you got to get these guys on campus, get them comfortable around these players. These guys become almost like brothers, and they want to play with each other. And that's the main thing. The more you get them on campus, the better shot you have.
Fish, you were asked on the message board, the Osceola's Premium Recruiting Board, who should we be watching? Who's potential on a commit watch? You had a couple names that you threw out there. It is possible that we'll see some commitments this weekend. It's possible it'll go into next week, into spring break, as a lot of guys will go back home and talk with mom and dad and high school coaches. But who are some guys that we should be watching here?
I think Jonathan Daniels, he was a kid I wasn't sure. And then, you start to see the reports again that he's high on Florida State. It seemed like he was kind of sliding a little. He did not have as good of a performance at the Under Armour Combine. And he's listed at 6'5". He measured in at 6'3". So is he a guard? He's listed as a tackle. He does have great length, but he's a guy that really likes FSU. The kid from Clearwater International we talked about, he was another guy, Charles Lester. Those are the main guys. I think that they have a really good shot. The one kid I'm really curious to see what happens, he's coming on campus this weekend, is Solomon Williams from Carrollwood Day. I think he's a Dante Fowler type defensive end. I know he's a 3-star. I think he's borderline 5-star. This kid is a pass rusher. You want these guys that could come off the edge and create havoc. He's a guy I want to see how he responds getting on campus. I think this is probably the first time he'll be on campus. But there's a few guys I think that they have a shot at getting commitments from. We talked about the three. I think the three main guys are Jason Zandamela, Lester, and the kid from Pensacola.
We should say on the Osceola we'll have full coverage today, as some of these guys will be arriving. But of course, Saturday will be a very busy day. Guys arriving in the morning, so we'll put together a photo gallery, updates, throughout the day on the recruiting board, just with updates with players arriving, departing later in the afternoon. Some might hang out at the baseball game. We've got a lot of two-sport prospects who might be in play here too, as they want to check out some baseball games and see how the program is doing over there at Hauser. So Fish, maybe as we wrap up, I think I'm going to ask you a similar question throughout these months as we get toward, December and the early signing period. But I think it's maybe interesting to evaluate, Mike Norvell as a high school recruiter. He, of course, walked into a rough situation with the roster being what it is, with an early signing period, then the prolonged COVID period. But I think we've seen each recruiting class has not only been ranked a little bit higher, a little bit better. We're seeing the quality of guys are consistently better. The roster's deeper. There's a lot of mentors and leaders to develop these younger prospects. Of course, it has the number 4 class in Rivals for 24 right now. How is Mike Norvell doing, big picture, getting kids on campus, selling the program, and not just the hope, but hey, coming off a 10-win season, selling what the next step might be?
Listen, everybody has a vision, but until you see it, it's a lot of people don't have that vision of seeing what something could look like 2-3 years down the road. They have to see it in front of them. And last year, Florida State proved to everybody that they are back. They won 10 games. They beat a very quality LSU team to start the season. So they beat an SEC team. So nobody could say, oh, they can't compete with the SEC. Well, they did. They beat an SEC team that finished strong and was in the top 10 till their bowl game. So they're in a good spot. They put themselves in a position to, like I said, they've gotten these kids on campus. There's interest now. The one thing I notice when you talk to recruits now, you don't have you just say, hey, what schools do you like? And Florida State comes out of their mouth. That wasn't the case 2 years ago. Everybody would name Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, all these other programs, and Florida State was kind of an afterthought. When you talk to these recruits now, it's like I said, you don't even have to bring up schools. You just say, hey, what schools are you interested in? And Florida State flows out of their mouth. These kids see what they see on TV. I've always said that Florida State is not a hard sale. Most guys, when you go into a school and you have that Florida State logo on that shirt, it gets you the front of the line. It doesn't guarantee you that you're going to land a kid, but it gives you a chance. Those kids are interested when they see that logo, and then it's upon the coaches to go out and recruit them. Not everybody could do it, but they got to do it. They got to close on these guys. Listen, they got these guys interested in they got their hooks in some really good prospects. Now go out, close the deal. And the more of these top guys you get in your class, I'll always go back I remember LaMarcus Joyner, Jeff Luck. These guys, when they were interested in Florida State, they were coming off a 6-6 season. Bowden was, was retiring, and those guys believed in it. They started it was like one kid said yes, another kid wanted to play with those guys. LaMarcus wanted to play there. Then you had Jeff Luck, and then also Christian Jones, and then all these guys were like, all right, we want to be the ones that turn this program around. Even a James Wilder. Wilder was a guy that was a Florida lean, and he just kept coming back to Florida State. And every time he came back, everything they said was going to happen was happening. So when you start to deliver on your promises of what the program is going to become, it's an easy sell. I mean, listen, Florida State has a lot to offer. A lot of other programs do too. But when they're on top, kids want to play there.
Yeah, winning, as you have always said, helps. Florida State being in a good location, great weather, very, very good facilities with a big football-only facility to be built in the coming years. So we'll see. But Mike Norvell continuing that climb. And Fish, we'll let you check out and get back to it. We appreciate your time as always. And Curt and I are going to jump in here, and we have a lot to discuss.
I made it through 16 minutes without but one
no
cough.
Coughing.
So. No coughing.
No coughing. We did have the cough button at the ready just in case.
No, but, I had my hand on the mute button, so I was ready to hit the mute button to back me out. But it was enjoyable, man. I'm glad. Listen, I hate to. You know me. I feel guilty if I'm not doing something. So I'm glad to be back on with you guys.
Yeah, we'll talk next week. We'll let you rest the throat, get some hot tea. And maybe Monday or Wednesday, we'll get you back out here, and we'll kind of wrap up the big recruiting weekend. So, but appreciate your time, Fish, as always.
Sounds great, man. Bye.
All right, Curt. We've got our hands full this weekend. In addition to recruiting, yeah, this is what March Madness is all about. I mean, usually we're talking a lot of men's basketball, but we still have a lot on our plate this weekend. I mean, I'm looking forward. Not just Friday, obviously we get practice number 3. We get a good baseball game, the ACC opener. Buster Posey's coming back too. I think where we might want to start is this is the first ACC series for Florida State. We've gotten a chance to see them, play TCU, play Gulf Coast. The starting rotation is also going to be juggled just a bit with Wyatt Crowell making that Saturday start. What are your thoughts on the necessity of moving Wyatt from that, break glass in case of emergency bullpen role that he's had, and he's done a really great job in that role, to now let's eat some innings from the first inning on Saturday? What do we think about this opportunity that Wyatt has?
Yeah, it felt like only a matter of time, even from the start of the season, when something like this was going to happen. I remember, Link Jarrett kind of talked pretty candidly when he didn't have Wyatt in the starting rotation to start the year about, like, this is it for now. It was very like a subject to change. I mean, this wasn't a team coming into the year like last year where you knew you had kind of a 1-2 punch of Parker Messick and Bryce Hubbard. I mean, a lot was up in the air. I mean, he's been great in that role. I mean, no doubt he has been the get out of jail free card that has been Wyatt Crowell the last few years, really, as the bullpen, like the Swiss Army knife, has been useful. But when you look at last weekend, when your 3 starting pitchers gave you 7 combined innings, that's just not going to cut it when you don't have a deep pitching staff. And I think this will be Wyatt's first start. As crazy as it is, as many innings as he's thrown here, this will be his first start Saturday, which is pretty wild. There's no reason to think it won't go, exceptionally well from how just reliable he's been out of the bullpen. And I think he'll give them some length. And, you're hoping you'll get – you saw what Jackson Bouwmeester, kind of the ceiling can be 2 weeks ago against TCU, 2 Fridays ago. And if he gives you that again, I think that sets up your weekend great. But if he doesn't, it almost feels like putting Wyatt in that Saturday spot between 2 guys you're less sure of, I think is great, because it means – if you have to use the bullpen heavily Friday and maybe even Sunday, hopefully Saturday you don't have to. And so I think that's what Wyatt gives you. I think it's also helpful. Putting him in the Sunday rotation kind of assures he won't be used in a midweek situation. As great as it was, that Florida, they used Connor and Connor Whitaker and Wyatt so heavily last week to win that Wednesday game against South Florida. It kind of messed them up for the weekend, where Connor wasn't available until Saturday. And then Wyatt wasn't even really available until Sunday, and so it screwed up how they'd been doing things. And so I think this way almost like makes it so you don't have Wyatt on the Tuesday, Wednesday games. He's just not going to be available for you there. And I think it's a wise choice entering kind of ACC play where things are about to ramp up pretty quickly.
Yeah, this feels like it's a great opportunity for Florida State to open 3-0 in the conference. The blueprint, of course, is Jackson Baumeister needs to give you 5-ish good innings and keep that lineup. Look, we know the lineup's gonna hit. We know there's going to be runs scored. If Jackson goes 5.1 innings, gives up say 2-3 runs at best, you like to think he exits the game with the Seminoles in the lead. Potentially, what I like about this Wyatt Crowell in the Saturday role is Connor Whitaker could be coming out of the pen Friday for a couple of innings, could be coming out of the bullpen Sunday for a couple of innings. Now, Florida State's got options. You got Ryan Dennison, you've got Doug Kirkland, you've got a couple that you feel like you feel pretty confident in. There is a drop off after that, and you're still kind of considering who's dependable, who can you count on. Do you kind of see similar to what I'm saying, a blueprint where they're setting this up for the most successful best case scenario would be to outright just go for it, use Connor on those bookend games and potentially get a sweep?
Well, yeah, I think it's theoretically possible. I think, an interesting name to throw in there. I mean, who had been the Saturday starters, Jamie Arnold. I think, it was interesting. I think it helped Link Jarrett's decision here a bit that Jamie out of the bullpen on Tuesday against Bethune-Cookman, kind of knowing he was going to be on a very limited pitch count. He'd thrown Saturday, and he was kind of in the later innings of that game where they were up comfortably. I think his velo was noticeably up. I think like for a guy who normally is in like the 90 range, 90, 91, I think he was even up to like 94. And so I think that was something where Link Jarrett was like, if it helps him, he hasn't been stellar on the weekends. He hasn't been dreadful, but as a freshman, throwing a freshman into the kind of the deep end of being a weekend starter, it hasn't just taken right away by any means. And so I think that gives you, I think Jamie made me more ready for that role. It was Bethune. That's probably one of the weaker teams on the schedule. Not a matchup that's gonna you're gonna be impressed by what someone does against them. Florida State did almost get the shutout. I think 1 out away, but it was I think that showed me something of Jamie, this may be the right role for him now too. It might just kind of be ideal for everybody around to move Wyatt in, to move Jamie back. You have a few others too. Brendan Oxford, Andrew Armstrong have shown you some things in their appearances this season, and so yeah, it's I'm interested to see how it plays out this weekend, how they go against a Pitt lineup that is I don't think exactly setting the world under fire, but I think they can hit. I don't think we'll see a repeat of last weekend though.
Right. And a couple other updates on the injury front. We're not going to see Diamez Ross, McGuire Holbrook anytime soon. It sounds like they're multiple weeks away from the way Link Jarrett referenced it when we asked on Thursday in our interview with him in the dugout. So, how the lineup shakes out without two really potential big pieces. Look, they're still averaging close to 10 runs a game, which is just phenomenal. Bottom line, though, if you're better on defense, if you're better up the middle, it's going to take the pressure off this pitching staff, and we'll see some good opportunities for some wins coming up here. And Curt, you had a chance to sit down with Colton Vincent. The best stories of this team all year has been Colton. We knew he would bring defense to the table, but he was right around 200 last year, injured from the start. Wasn't the dream season, I think, for him growing up a Florida State fan, but Colton is leading Florida State in average in doubles and hitting from the left side of the plate, which is yet another phenomenal aspect to this. But Curt, your impressions of Colton and just what he's brought to this team so far?
Yeah, it was actually, I think, the first time he really did media yesterday. He's not a guy, like we said, didn't play much in his first year in 2021. Last year, didn't play. He was somewhat of a bad luck kid. I think he hit the ball hard and didn't always get rewarded for that. But still, he was a sub 200, I guess, below the Mendoza line. batting average. I think there were questions if it was going to be his spot, especially bringing in a guy like McGuire Holbrook from West Virginia. And yeah, it's been quite a nice redemptive story for him. I think the Link Jarrett approach has made a difference for him. I mean, he whether he meant this to come off the way it did or not, he kind of is like, going up there with a plan makes all the difference in the world. So, I mean, that comes off a certain way maybe about how things used to be, but it speaks highly of how things are now. And I think we've seen that with a number of hitters, that difference, but probably no one more than Colton. And also he's a guy, I mean, he's funny. Switch hitting for the first time in his career this season. He kind of talked about how he would always fiddle around batting lefty, like only batting righty in games. And he was kind of just doing it in the batting cages one day in the fall. And Link Jarrett saw and was like, hey, we kind of could use another guy who could hit lefty in this lineup. Could you could we work on it a little? Let's see if that's something you could actually do. And it was natural enough for him that he's doing it. And it's made a difference for him. I mean, having that left-handed bat when there aren't a ton of those in the lineup. I mean, Link kind of talked yesterday. He said if Colton wasn't switch hitting, if Nander DeSatis wasn't switch hitting, really, I mean, James Tibbs would be about the only left-handed bat they have in the everyday lineup, as crazy as that is. So, yeah, it's been, I mean, a welcome addition. I thought he was a really good interview. I said, go watch that. And yeah, read the story I wrote on the website, but the interview on our YouTube. And in that story, I really enjoyed getting to talk to him. I thought he was a pretty compelling guy for someone I've never talked to.
Yeah, it's good stuff from Colton. I think we're all happy to see kind of a most improved player type of story. And who knows if 400 is sustainable for a catcher, because over the course of a long haul, it's tough. But if McGuire Holbrook comes back, if they can figure out some kind of platoon, maybe one is a DH, one's a catcher, we'll see what plays out there. But keeping Colton healthy, keeping him in that lineup is going to be pretty big for Florida State. If you have tickets, you'll want to be there early Friday night. Jameis Winston will throw out the first pitch, so you'll want to be there for that. A bunch of the NFL guys will be on the field, and they'll be honored briefly before the first pitch. And of course, Saturday, get there a little bit earlier than just a first pitch, because Buster Posey, one of the legends of Florida State's program, and a guy who I remember playing every spot on the baseball diamond one game, and that was fun just to see, Mr. Versatility out there. He will be back. His number will be retired, just the fourth number to be retired out in center field at Hauser. So it'd be good to have Buster Posey back. You'll want to be there about 2:30 or so. And again, if you can't make it, we'll take some videos. We'll upload to social media, YouTube, and the site. So we'll kind of have you covered, even if you're not able to be in the park. You'll be watching at a distance. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I say I've met Buster once. Excited to get to talk to him. I think he's going to have a media type thing where we can write stories after talking to him. But definitely a great ambassador for that program. I mean, it's a cliche that's definitely thrown around, but it might apply to Buster about as well as anybody. I think it's the great baseball player, better person that is Buster Posey.
Yeah, and I don't know the full backstory, but he and his wife did, one of their charitable efforts is for pediatric cancer. They started that out in San Francisco, and they've got some kids of their own now, some younger kids. So good to see how influential he was in the lives of so many people, out in the Bay Area, just loved out there. So it's good to have Buster Posey back. And hey, it's a big weekend if we're almost 30 minutes in, and we're finally getting to a top 10 softball matchup. Florida State going out to Oklahoma State in what, I asked Lonnie Alameda, is this going to be like a super regional? And she thinks, very much yes. There will be fans in the outfield. They're not exactly used to that, playing Florida State where they've played so far. Clearwater didn't have fans in the outfield, so you're going to be surrounded by OSU fans. A little bit different there. It will be kind of that game within the game of who you pitch when from Lonnie Alameda's standpoint. So I think lots to look forward to as far as how they match up in these games. We haven't talked as much softball of late just because they've cruised through 11 straight wins. I'm not sure any of them have been very close, but this is an opportunity to get ramped up again into the ACC part of the schedule. Curt, just your thoughts on where Florida State is. I think we're now 23 games in, and looking forward to some big weekends ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think from here, ACC play kicks in, I think, next weekend for them, right? It's funny, baseball's starting ACC play before softball. I feel like they're kind of backwards because baseball starts later. But, I mean, it's been, I think, business. They've kind of taken care of business in games you would expect. I know the last 2 weekends after Clearwater have definitely been those. I think they added the third, home tournament this year, and I know the competition has not been by any means the stiffest the last few weekends. A lot of run rule victories, but this will be a litmus test for this group. This will be I mean, where are they at? I mean, it's like you said, it's a hostile atmosphere. I think it's I know they hosted Oklahoma State last year for a home series. I think they win 2 out of 3 in that.
I think so.
I
think so.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, it's kind of a return trip for that, I guess. But yeah, I'm excited to see how things go for them. And then obviously, I know they're staying out there a few extra days. Lonnie's getting her first return to OU to Norman. I mean, she's been to OKC so many times, but her alma mater, Oklahoma, they're staying there and playing a game Tuesday, and that's, I mean, an even bigger test. Oklahoma's State's, I think, third, but Oklahoma is, I mean, the UConn women's basketball of college softball. I mean, they are the running things right now, have been for a while under Patty Gasso.
I'm sure Lonnie will take a walk through campus and reminisce a little bit, and she's always tweeting the softball walks with coffee, the coffee walks. That's right.
Yep.
So we'll be looking forward to those in the coming days. And if you don't have ESPN Plus, I know it's one more thing you have to buy, but this is good timing to jump on ESPN Plus because you'll get the Florida State UCF baseball series midweek, Tuesday and Wednesday. Next week, you may want to jump in. There are no free trials. I'll be honest. We've looked into it. No free trials, but you'll have a chance to get 3 softball games this weekend, Florida State OU midweek next week on ESPN Plus, and then there's baseball games coming up too. So you may want to jump in and splurge for $10.
And not to be a salesperson, but don't they have that bundle with, I think, Disney Plus and Hulu for like $20? Like that's, I mean, probably an even bigger deal right there, and get stuff for the kids or significant other that mixes in as well.
I've caught the first episodes of Mandalorian, so that's been a good start right there, getting Disney Plus into. So yeah, good stuff. All right, so not so much to talk about on the men's basketball front yet for the Florida State men, but we'll get into that next week as the transfer portal will really ramp up, and we'll kind of be looking into the roster, who's coming, who's leaving. I think we'll start to see some transactions there, but on Selection Sunday, the women will gather over at the Glory Days restaurant on Capitol Circle Northeast, and they will watch the selection show. We'll be there. So if you'll be watching on TV, we'll get some kind of reaction videos from, Coach Brooke Wyckoff and the players. Tanaya Latson, we fully expect will be back. Saw on Twitter today that she was mentioned by The Athletic as their national freshman women's basketball player of the year. So that just kind of puts in perspective, not just the best rookie or freshman in the conference, but nationally, Tanaya Latson being recognized by a respected media voice there in The Athletic. Curt, I've been checking in on some of these bracketologies. Charlie Cream, with ESPN is probably the most notable guy out there doing the women's bracket. It looks like they're a 7 and not a 6 seed. I think I was maybe more optimistic about the Seminoles making a run to the Sweet 16 when they were a 5 or a 6. How might a 7 impact it? How might you're going to play somewhere really odd, like an Iowa City, potentially a College Park. You're going to be. This team has not played well away from Tallahassee either. There's a lot of things going against Florida State in some regards, but how do you see potentially it might play out if they are a 7 seed?
Yeah, there's some unique cities in there, but also some interesting matchups. I mean, if it were a Tanaya Latson versus Caitlin Clark, kind of Iowa, maybe like the national player of the year, I mean, that could be a pretty interesting second round matchup there. Yeah, it will be a challenge for them. I mean, the 2 losses to kind of, I would say, lesser teams, I mean, teams that aren't going to make the NCAA tournament, and Clemson and Wake Forest down the stretch definitely hurt things. And you would think maybe the committee would view, especially the Wake Forest loss, with maybe an asterisk, knowing they didn't have Tanaya Latson, and that I think Tanaya probably changes that game where they had built such a comfortable halftime lead and kind of saw it slip away. But yeah, it makes things tougher. I think, I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I mean, you almost feel, did expectations raise too high when kind of they were maybe really overachieving what we thought they were, kind of when things were really peaking, when they were comfortably a top 4 ACC team, kind of right behind Notre Dame and Duke for the lead. Then they fell off just the littlest bit down the stretch. You wonder, I mean, I think this season was always more about building blocks. I think that second round against a team like that 2 seed, whoever that might be, if that's how things break down, is still valuable for the future. With Tanai only being a freshman, you bring back a few other pieces as well. I mean, Kayla Timpson will be back, and so yeah, I think it's a valuable experience whatever comes out of it. Yes, the path is harder, but I'm also, when you have someone like Tanai, I'm not going to say they can't do it. I mean, we have started to see more parity in college basketball. I think at least one, if not two's lost before the Sweet 16 last year in college basketball on the women's side, which kind of used to be more reserved for the men's side.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. You always wonder about the rest versus rust discussion when you're playing literally 2 weeks after your last game in the ACC tournament. I don't love the way that the women's game has to almost wait until the men's tournaments have wrapped up and then they start these NCAA tournaments at the same time. I'm sure that's a TV deal and that's the way the networks want it. So be it. Well, let's wrap up here. Talk a little bit about ACC men's basketball. And this has not been the best season for the league schools. ESPN projecting just 5 will make the field of 68. They have Virginia, Miami, Duke, NC State, and Pitt in the field. I believe they have Pitt in the play-in games up in Ohio. That's an interesting dynamic there, where a team that's accomplished so much would potentially be relegated to a quick turnaround. But so be it. Curt, I will lean toward ESPN's Joe Lunardi all day long because he values and reads all the conferences, watches all the games. You watch a little bit more of the national college games than I do. How many teams from the ACC do you think will make this field of 68?
I would say it's probably a 5 number. The one variable at this point, I mean, North Carolina lost yesterday in the ACC quarters. They kind of lost that chance to probably, if they may have needed to win it all. Clemson is I mean, they upset NC State last night. If Clemson beats Virginia tonight in the semis and gets to the championship game, that might be enough for them. They're kind of an odd resume where they were a top 4 seed in the ACC. I think they had 13 or 14 ACC wins. They also had, I think, 2 or 3 quad 4 losses. It's kind of a very Jekyll and Hyde resume. And so I think they got Virginia tonight in the nightcap at 9:30. I think if they win that might be enough to make them the 6th. But yeah, it was I mean, I've seen some people try to pivot it as like, oh no, the ACC just had parity this year. The ACC wasn't down, and like I've seen that Louisville team, I've seen that Florida State team. I'm not miss me with that being the. I mean, you're gonna mold the narrative how you want, but no, it was not a particularly good year for the ACC. Probably a good thing for Florida State. This Florida State team wouldn't have won 6 ACC games in a number of recent years. They kind of got lucky, I think, with a less juggernauty ACC this year.
Yeah, weird year. I think maybe one of our discussion points next week will be looking at the brackets and really which ACC team might have a decent shot of getting to the Sweet 16. I mean, we'll be very curious what the matchups look like, and we can kind of discuss, does Miami have a chance to make a run? A team I think we hold Miami in high regard, and that's a potential team that can put it together because of what they present, mostly from the outside, but they've got some inside presence too. North Carolina lost the opportunity. They went from being the NIL champion. They were the NIL champion. Maybe they are going to be the NIT champion in the end if they choose to accept that responsibility and go to the NIT. I can't imagine they will be fired up to go. What would you do? I mean, if you're a player or a coach, what do you think? Do you want to play in a tournament like that?
Again, the team is the season is the preseason number 1. No, I don't think so. I think there are teams who could pivot an NIT championship as like a we accomplished something. I think North Carolina celebrating anything they accomplished in that tournament would almost be like fraudulent, because I think they're the fourth AP number one to miss the tournament, but they're the first since the tournament expanded to 64. Like, it's a little more excusable if you're missing, what was it, maybe a 32 team tournament. I don't know if that was the round of expansion before 64, but yeah, it's they got overhyped off of a pretty great tournament run and getting hot at the right time last year. And the NIL champs, it's a cautionary tale, a little, maybe not overhyping that team.
Yeah, and I think some coaches will not want to expand to 96. Other coaches might say, I wouldn't mind just getting my foot in the door. It's an incentive in their contract. They can recruit off of it and say, we've made the NCAA tournament this many years in a row. I think I'd be okay with 96 teams. If we went, that high in the future, I'm not sure we'd want to jump into the 120s. That seems a little too much, but there has been some discussion that maybe the NIT would dissolve. You'd fold it into the NCAA so that you would expand the big dance in that manner. Good kind of off-season discussion for the college basketball fans and administrators out there who will kind of break all that down. Well, I think we've hit a good stopping point. We're 41 minutes into the show on a Friday afternoon. We hope you all have a great weekend. If you are in town, you've got a lot to watch baseball-wise. Be out there at Hauser again early for those games Friday and Saturday. If you can't make it, check us out on theosceola.com. We'll have full coverage in story form, but also we'll get you some videos. Obviously, you'll want to see Jameis Winston back on Friday, Buster Posey back on Saturday. Buster will be talking to the media, so we'll have a chance as a group to talk to him. And I'm sure Buster will be speaking, to the fans from the heart of what his return to Hauser means. So thank you again for watching Seminole Sidelines. Again, we'll be back Monday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook for the Osceola. We appreciate Charles Fishbein joining us and not having to hit the cough button. Thank you, Fish, for joining us. 15 good minutes on recruiting there at the start. If you're jumping in late, you can go back and watch on YouTube or catch on Apple or Spotify. And Curt Weiler, thank you again for joining me. And I know we'll be seeing you in a couple hours. We'll be out there on the practice field for the first day in full pads for Florida State football. So Curt will have observations. We'll have some video highlights and photos and all from the practice field. So the start of a very, very busy but fun 3-day weekend for everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.